I'm Holly Scott. I'm with a firm called the Mullings Group. We have been building companies through executive search, advisory, and media services for 3 decades plus. And this is a topic near and dear to my heart. We've been asked to speak about founder mode. And that's a really interesting topic that we're going to dive into. And the genesis of this founder mode topic was essentially based on a viral essay that Paul Graham wrote in reference to Brian Chesky, the CEO of Airbnb's speech, essentially. He caught the speech, and the speech was, just in short, conventional wisdom about running companies that are growing is mistaken. Founders are advised to move from founder mode to manager mode and hire good people and let them do their jobs. And it's not always the winning move. In fact, he found it to be disastrous. And he had to figure out a better way. He did a lot of studying of Steve Jobs at Apple and other successful founding CEOs. And of course, now, the company's $10 billion in excess. So obviously we're in medtech, a different market, but I think there's lessons to be learned from experiences of founders here and from discussions like these. So given this is a workshop, we really do want to encourage questions and healthy discussions. But let's start with some intros and get going. So I'm going to leave it to you, Dr. Jaworski, to introduce yourself, maybe tell a little bit about yourself.
Yeah. So my name is Ella Elizabeth Jaworski. I have a PhD in biochemistry from the University of Texas Medical Branch. I studied virus evolution. In my PhD, I actually helped start my first company, which was a spin out of technology that we developed in the research lab. The company was called ClickSeq Technologies. The company's still around. We have a kit on the market, which is really exciting. But I wanted to do something more hands-on, mechanical, and I got the opportunity right after grad school to be a biodesign fellow out of the Texas Medical Center's innovation program. It's a 1-year fellowship to find unmet clinical needs and build a company and a product, which is where XN Health was born. So we are preventing ventilator injury to the 1.5 million Americans that require mechanical ventilation every year. We do this through stimulating the diaphragm to get it out of the way and let the ventilator do its job.
Thank you. Vijit Sabnis, Dr. Sabnis.
I've got a PhD in electrical engineering from Stanford. I do not come from the healthcare or the medical device space. I started my career at a telecommunications startup. Then I co-founded a solar energy company. And then I was a technology venture capital investor at Cosa Ventures for 5 years. Became really passionate about how we collect data in our healthcare system and how it's generally broken. And so we had a thesis around data and the need to collect that data in a much more efficient way. Put AI around that. Back then we used to call it big data. Now it's AI. And got really passionate about wanting to be an operator again and go off and do something very impactful. So 2.5 years ago, we spun another company out of Stanford called Adaptyx Biosciences. We're building a wearable technology platform that will continuously monitor biomolecules in our body, similar to a CGM. We're focusing first on congestive heart failure, but this is really a platform that could measure over time really hundreds of different molecules continuously.
Awesome.
Thank you. Dr. Sanchez?
Sure. So I also have a technical background. I'm working on it. But my degrees are in mechanical engineering from MIT, and then I did a master's and PhD at Stanford, also in mechanical engineering. I was on an academic track, so I was hired right out of my PhD as a faculty in bioengineering. I had invented a new type of imaging for my PhD that I thought had maybe broader potential than being siloed in the university. So I went through the process of licensing that out, started my company Enspectra. And what we're doing is a new type of imaging for skin, everything from beautiful to clinical in terms of evaluating pathology under the surface non-invasively. We've gone from kind of concept through a few trials. We're FDA cleared now, reimbursable. And it was the first new imaging physics cleared by the FDA in over 25 years. So it's a pretty impactful technology that we're really excited about.
Yes, that's great. Thank you all for the intro and just kind of generally categories we have on first CEO, first time founding.
Mm-hmm.
10 years plus though. So that's in dog years, quite a while, right? We've got multiple startups outside of tech and now in med tech. And now you're on your second startup as a founder. Okay. So as we think about leading these organizations and the health of the company, and from the vantage point I sit in, it's what's in the best interest of the team, and do we have the right individual, the right style, the right affect to make the actions that we need. So I'd like to just talk a little bit about the key traits of founders that are really critical in the early days. Okay, so just some of the things that were mentioned as I was doing some research: deep commitment to the vision, the North Star, customer-centric, a bias towards action, high level of engagement, hands-on, active in various aspects of the business, agility, adaptability, data-driven decision-making, strong work ethic, leadership, curiosity, and a mindset for learning. Now, I'd like you to think about these attributes and perhaps share with us a little bit about your experiences there, and maybe even where these might have been double-edged swords in some circumstances, okay? Because the goal here is to empower the audience to think about their own scenario and what they can learn from your experiences. And would you like to start?
Yeah. Oh, those are all great. No, it's all super important. All those qualities. I always found that those qualities like agility or this like desire for the North Star, right? You have this product vision can be both great and detrimental, right? Because then it makes you sometimes not willing to pivot because you want to do this one specific thing. So you have to be simultaneously on track, but willing to take new information in and adjust as necessary. So I always found that being a founder is riding right at the edge of doing things appropriately. And that's a hard thing to define, right? Because you just have to take what you know and data as it comes and just keep moving forward.
Any additional comments on that, Vijit?
Yeah, I mean, I think, I read the article and I do think this is a little bit of a messy topic because there's not a phenotype for founders that's super well defined. But I think all the characteristics you mentioned are right on. And I think some of the challenges that I've seen in lots of different companies, and certainly the frustrations I've had just in my company, which is 2.5 years old, is things are changing all the time. So there's a vision we want to go towards, but how we get there is a complete mess, and it's going to change over time. And your employees and even your fellow co-founders, who may be technically the best in the world, they don't like to see change all the time, right? And I think that's true when you're very small. But it's even true when you've got 50 people there. And so it's really about shifting context. And, I think, just to be a little self-critical about myself is I'm not always sharing that change about how I'm thinking about things or something that I learned from the outside. And as I mentioned, I'm a relatively new medtech founder and CEO, and I'm learning a lot of things all the time. And my team doesn't know what's going on all the time. And so we're going towards this vision, but they may see me go left and right all the time. And that can be a big frustration in both directions.
Really good insight. I want to earmark a couple of those points and come back, but I definitely want to hear from Gabriel on this.
Yeah, no, I would double down on that. I think if you were to generalize a little bit, one of the things I've seen in, say, like a founder, operator, CEO is they're a little more mission or vision driven, maybe less so than like a professional CEO is going to be process driven. And those are useful in kind of different modes depending on what you're facing. Like if you're in the trenches and it's wartime, I think the founder operators can be very effective because you kind of hold to that vision that sort of transcends all the challenges, and you're also very effective with kind of your domain knowledge to be able to jump out and create some sort of value. The common situation for this is that catch-22 paradox, where you need some money to show something, but you can't get the money without showing the thing. But that's where founders are pretty good at creating stuff out of nothing. And I think you can shake that out. But I think you also then, it's double-edged. You got to be very honest with yourself. When you get a little success and then you start kind of flowing, and it actually is more about process. I think you have to be really careful that you're not so locked into your own mindset that you're missing the opportunity to grow. And I think it's this interesting balance between, can you mature at the pace that's needed for your organization? Also, do you have people around you to kind of fill in some of the experience that you may not have? So I think it can cut both ways. Probably most stuff just gets evaluated like everywhere. It's based on the ends. Like if it works, people say that it was effective, and if it didn't, probably not. Right. So it's very interesting.
It's interesting because there's so much about our industry that is black and white. You need certain approvals. You need a reimbursement path. You need certain clinical data. You need these pieces. Is it reasonable to say that based on milestones, there's a time that makes sense to go from, say, a founder-driven company to more other leaders, this managerial mode that we're referencing here? What do you think, Ella?
I think it depends on the founder and their willingness to step into that new role. I think a startup company from startup to commercialization goes through 3, 4, 5 different changes of what the company looks like, right? Early stage, you're scrappy and quick, versus commercial, you got to be more process driven and you got a bigger team. So the company looks totally different. So if the founder is malleable and willing to do those changes and grow as the company grows, absolutely. I think founders have the incredible capacity to learn and to adapt. And if that's something that they want to do, they absolutely should be able to do it. But it's not for everybody, right? I like creative. I don't know if I would like process and very strict regimented type things and managerial stuff. So I don't see myself going all the way to that commercial stage, obviously being a part of the company, but it's not something that I truly enjoy. So I think it really just depends on the founder and what they want to do and where they see themselves.
And you have a high level of self-awareness, especially for, frankly, your youth experience-wise in the business. You're on your second company. You know about yourself, what you love to do, where your sweet spot is, where your magic is, and you're able to capture that. And you even said to me in our earlier call, I don't think anyone else could do my job. That's what you said. And when you said it, it took me a second to think through. And where you sit, you're 100% right. Where you're at in your organization, that's where that founder mode is absolutely critical, right? So as we look at drawbacks of founders, micromanagement, burnout, lack of empowerment of the team, of key team members, over-reliance on founder decisiveness, and the continuity and confidence and the ability to scale, lack of experience in next level growth, extreme agility, lack of structure, chaos, uncertainty, future reliance, again, lack of scale on interpretation of founders. So these are some of the things that are discussed, and frankly, some of the offline conversations I end up having with board members that say, time to bring in somebody else. So the reason we should discuss this is at some point, it's not a black and white answer, right? There's things that can be done on both sides that may pull out more productivity. What are your thoughts, Vijit? And I'm going to point to you specifically because in tech, we see a lot more scale. And I'll speak to the medtech audience here. You may not need to hire more than 2, 4, or 5 people in the next 3 years. But the reality is your investors want the confidence that you can and would if needed, right? So speak to us a little bit about this and what decisions go into when timing is right for you.
Yeah, I mean, the way I think about it is, when you're an early stage company, and for example, in our case, we are trying to build a platform That's almost a dirty word in medtech. So I almost didn't want to say that, but when the frustration coming from founders is oftentimes the team doesn't have the right context. And part of that is the founder's fault because they don't communicate. They're off running around. I almost feel like I should do like a weekly all hands, or I need to go around to everyone and make sure they know what they need to do. But the bottom line is when you're building a medtech company, there's an indication for use. Once you have scientifically de-risked that, the context is not shifting. It better not be shifting. And you need to get those role players in there, and you need to let them do what they need to do. And I think that's where you have to graduate. When I was doing a solar company, it was a different time, it was a different era. Our investors gave us 4 years to really develop the technology before we really knew that it worked. We ended up getting the world record in solar cell efficiency. And once we had that, is like, we know where we're going, we know what we need to do, and we could bring in those role players, and you've got to be able to let go. And so, for example, I was very hands-on in the technology, but once we got there, it was like, I'm focused on business development. I'm focused on communicating our value proposition to customers. And so I completely pulled away from that part of the business because that's what we needed to do. And we brought in manufacturing people. We brought in that version of quality at that time. And so you just have to, there are these very natural inflection points. And I do see parallels in medtech. We're kind of transitioning out of science mode, collecting that initial clinical data. And once we sort of turn that corner, the context cannot shift. And I've got to bring in the right people and let them go do what they're going to do way, way better than frankly, anything that I could ever affect.
I think that last point is critical, right? The ability to do it better than you because you have things that you're better at to focus on.
Yeah.
That's really important. Gabriel, I'd like you, because you are you've had a long time with one organization. Talk to us about burnout. How do you manage that? Because as I counsel individuals who are considering becoming a CEO of a startup, I encourage them to think of it as their number one life priority. They got to be in a position where they can give it that much attention and commitment. So I'm curious about how you've managed that.
Sometimes poorly. I mean, it's hard. I mean, so the tricky part is, one of your key advantages as someone who can dig deep is that you can put more in, and you're one of your cheaper resources. And I think you're at a very high risk of burning yourself out. The best thing I think is and this kind of gets to your previous point about like, how long can you stay in the role? I probably stayed longer than more people thought. I do think it's been for us a constant discussion. It's been mostly milestone based. I had no experience in running clinical trials or navigating regulatory considerations, reimbursement, et cetera. But thus far, I've managed to keep up and sort of learn at the pace we needed and guide through that on one hand. On the other hand, by supplementing with kind of key leaders that I could really rely on. So one of the things that worked really effective, at least at Enspectra, the duo we have is, so I'm still operating and CEO, but I have a COO. And he's got a lot of experience and he's really deep, and we are very non-overlapping in our skill sets. And I was really intentional on hiring individuals that we did not have like 4 clones of Gabriel, but we actually have very different skill sets, and that freed me up to kind of do the things that I do. And he can keep the business, all the granular nitty-gritty necessary things that are really important to kind of keep the business going. He's got a lot of experience with that. And that's actually helped me to both manage my burnout and my demand, but also keep the company moving really effectively. And I'm still providing sort of the high-level strategic guidance. So that's one of the things that has worked quite well for us. But I do think that is a significant risk for anybody, especially when you're early and it's just 2 of you. I mean, I think that's like your cheapest resource is your time, and then it's just very natural just to sort of overextend yourself. So something I just think about it a lot. But I think I was younger when I did that also, so I had more juice. So like now we've kind of gotten through that. I don't know that I would want to go back and do that again, honestly. But I don't quite have to, so I'm kind of glad. Yeah.
Why do you think we like the first time?
Yeah.
Because they don't know how bad it is, right?
That Yeah, ignorance insulates you a little bit. It's kind of good. Yeah.
Hey, we're in medtech. It's worth it. It's worth it. This is a workshop, so I want to make sure that we hear from the audience too. I would love to hear questions, comments, and also experiences, especially if you're a founder who has made a critical hire or made a decision not to make a critical hire at any junction. Anything? Would anyone like to offer anything? Sandra, I see you right there. So I know you've been in the founder seat for some time, especially in a tough position last few years.
The decision to make or not make a critical hire.
Yeah, and you've been really busy the last couple of years being deliberate.
Yeah, no, we've been. Our team, I think is similar to what Gabriel was saying, is in that the co-founders are very non-overlapping in our skill sets. So we were very intentional when we founded the company to have, I'm a scientist by training, but I came from the business side with sales experience, and then I had a background clinician and then a PTO. We've been able to just keep the whole ship going forward. And we try to pull from advisors, our clinical advisory board, and we have, scientists that we talk to, and just as needed, I guess, we try to be as cost effective as possible. So we've been good at staving off hires, but it is at some point you just need to have, you need to expand the team when things just aren't getting done. Mm-hmm. So yeah,
that's great. No, that's helpful. And the consistent theme I hear from founders and young teams is that ability to lead broadly in a number of different classic functional areas within a business, but pulling in expertise as needed. If you think back on experiences that you've had, and Vijit, I'll go to you because of the scale you've experienced, is there one pivotal hire? Gabriel referenced the COO as being the big differentiator. From where you sat, what was the role that kind of made the difference for you?
We in my previous company, we were very lucky, and we were able to bring in some technical hires that were young, fresh PhDs, and they were just monsters in ownership, right? And they delivered. We as a team delivered, and I thought it was a really nice sort of milestone to give up part of my job. And that was one of the things that I grew into. It's great that I no longer have to do this. It's great that I can pop into the lab and see things are working, and my team has grown, and they've really taken ownership over everything. And it allows me to go do the other fires that are going forward in the company at that time. So that's the things that I really look forward to, is when can we get to the point where there are these little mini graduations before you're commercially successful and whatnot. But, and I do think, where Gabriel is, you have a COO. I'm thinking about that right now. We're kind of at my company, we're kind of graduating into needing to be very methodical, needing to be more process oriented, and that's less suitable for kind of how my mind works and what I enjoy doing.
Two things on that I think are fascinating. The engineering side that you handed off, and with happiness that you're able to give over. What was it at a point in the product development lifecycle where it was more development focused, where the actual product going to market? So you're not looking at research anymore. You were in development.
Yeah, okay. Absolutely.
Okay. Yeah. I think that's critical with a founder. That's an important piece, because unless you're totally sure about the product being...
When you're in science mode, things are way too messy. You've got to be involved. Yeah. You've got to have the right people there. Yeah.
That's good to know. And the operations piece, Gabriel, with hiring that, when someone comes to me and says they need a COO, that is likely one of the most broad categories that we can hire for. So I ask a lot of questions. I'm curious, what was on your list in terms of bringing in a good COO? And it could be just the top, few things that jump to mind.
No. I wish I was that intentional. I was lucky because I was I was so one of the things you may not know, I'm in an incubator called Fogarty Innovation, and so part of the reason also why I've been able to operate effectively and hang on so long is because I have a wealth of sage guidance and coaching from people that actually have lived that experience in the industry, and that's been a huge advantage. And they were like, "You really need a COO," and in fact, we kind of know what the phenotype might be that would be really useful. And so the thing that I did that was effective was I listened and I was welcoming of the input, and I went with someone who is not a clone of myself, but actually very much complements what I do, and it's actually worked out really, really well. But I probably would not have had the experience to draw on really to fully to characterize what that person would be, because I had come straight out of academia into the space. I could do it now based on now having done this for a while, and what I'm looking for is for something like that, I'm looking for someone who's, like I say, more process driven, understands the nuances of the space, highly organized and structured. I'm a little more creative. And then, there's another interesting thing, but for whatever this is worth, like we did a Myers-Briggs test among our core, kind of our VP to C-suite, and we didn't have a single overlapping personality within that group, which kind of gets to the point that when we're hiring, we're looking for gaps, and we're not trying to replicate what we already have. We're trying to fill in the holes. So I sort of look at what I'm really good at, and then I'm trying to find somebody who can fill in the gaps. So that frees me up for that. And then the other thing is I really empowered our COO. I actually made him president. So the idea there too is when I did that, is kind of put him a little bit on par with myself in terms of decision making and stuff. So he has a lot of autonomy and authority as well. And so we've been a really good duo.
So let's stay on that for a minute, because if that's working successfully, what did you do in diligence to ensure that you two had the connection that could allow for that? Because that's where I see a lot of it go off the rails with a hire.
Definitely. So we met a lot. We really got to know each other. Timing was perfect. He had just come off an acquisition, a successful acquisition, which is also nice. But so he was in a good space because he didn't need to work immediately. So that helped because he had some time, and we basically got to like date for quite a long time, and get to know each other really well. And at the end of the day, for me, it kind of still just comes down to vibes of like, if you really feel that you can work and communicate with this person, probably the key thing is going to be communication, to Vijit's point, because like, as the founder, sometimes you see a pathway, and because of your unique perspective, you see things other people don't see, and it'd be very hard for them to have faith in you and to trust you. And now it's your job to communicate that the most that you can. And I think we had a really good vibe in terms of sharing information and communicating. So ultimately, I was like, I think this is going to work. It did work out, so I'm grateful for that. But I'd say I took a little time getting to know him. So
that's okay. Yeah. That's okay. You can
It's
still
a
get
bit
accelerated hiring timeline, by the way, and have thorough diligence and have multiple conversations and realize the ability to trust and communicate and talk about the tough stuff. That's great. That's important. Do you have any comments on that? I see you smiling. I feel like you've had...
No, I think I'm just resonating so much with this. When I was on the investor side of the table, I did a lot of exec recruiting, and it is incredibly difficult. So I'm just happy for Gabriel that it worked out well, because it's not oftentimes the case.
Doesn't always work out. Yeah.
So the time that it didn't work out, how soon did you know that this was on the wrong path?
I saw multiple times it falling apart in less than 12 months.
Okay.
It's relatively fast. Yeah.
So what are the warning signs that we can all look for if we're seeing the wrong founder move? Maybe it's the timing for the founder. Maybe it's the timing for that replacement. What can we do better?
What I saw just in my experience is oftentimes we're bringing in people who are very, very strong role players, very strong operational experience. And when they get into a startup, unless they've had that stage experience, they're going to come in and be like, whoa, this is not for me, right? They can see challenges with fundraising. They can see technical risk, operational risk. They can see kind of the messiness that is oftentimes present in young companies. And that's just not for everyone. That was probably the major phenotype that I saw, that where things did not work very well,
Went off the
even though they had the most amazing skill set, right? So
for a certain situation. It's all
Yeah.
situational.
Yeah.
That's the challenge of hiring, challenge and the opportunity, really. And you've stayed relatively small, but you've had a co-founder and relationships that for a long time now, correct? The co-founder. And so when you determined that you were going to found an organization, was it like a marriage? Was it that kind of a rapport and complementary skill set?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, when you go, the company's your baby, so it is a marriage, right? You're building and developing this thing with somebody. So kind of, I found like having a co-founder was like hiring. It's this person that you want to spend a lot of time of the day with. You know, you have to collaborate really well. You don't have to agree on everything, but you have to be able to communicate effectively to one another. So I've been lucky that my co-founders have been very complimentary, but have got along together and are able to communicate what their ideas are to one another. So yeah, it's very important. I'm listening like diligently because I'm about to hire 3 people. So trying to figure out what you guys are saying of what's important. So it's a
process. The diligence is important. Yeah. Let me pause for any questions. Anyone have any questions for the founders? Yes, please. Can you come to the microphone? Thank you.
So I have a question about hiring, and I loved what you said about platform being a dirty word in medtech, but I think it's completely unavoidable because we have completely new tools disrupting how we collect and analyze data, and ultimately AI is going to lead towards prevention and not just treatment. So with that in mind, I have a diagnostics company, and we need to get FDA and all that. And right now we're looking to hire somebody who understands the product and who can develop the product. And here's the dilemma. Investors want, especially in medtech, investors want somebody who's done this before, worked at J&J for 50 years, owned P&L, knows FDA. However, we as founders want somebody who can understand that platform vision and really take our diagnostics, imaging, AI into a platform of the future, understanding the trends that are coming, gaps in the market. So I just want to get your thinking, because we had lots of debates on that, how we feel about it and why. And I would love to get your thinking around how to discern this. Thank you.
Great question. Who wants to take the first?
Yeah, I mean, I'll start and take a shot at this. I think I'm a little bit less concerned about what you are today. I think 5 years ago, I would be super concerned that at a large established company, you could find someone that had that breadth and could sort of carry that forward. You know, when I was starting to invest in diagnostics and stuff 10 years ago, again, you know, I made the joke we used to call it big data. Now I would say it's like machine learning and AI. That was very new. And that was a big shift in people's mentality that, look, I can collect a bunch of data that by itself means nothing, but I can develop these algorithms, can do a lot. I feel like today the train has left the station. All big companies are working in this area. So I do think it's, you know, maybe if you go through the dating process a little bit, and so you can feel comfortable with that. But I'm a little bit less worried about that now than I would have been in the past.
Worried about which part of it? Less worried about hiring someone from?
Yeah, someone who's going to be able to carry out that breadth and turn this into a platform, because I think that's just better appreciated today. That there is a mountain, there is a lot of things that can be done. That it's still early innings, you know, in the game for how we're going to use AI with diagnostics and other types of, you know, other types of modality for collecting data. So I do think that there's just a larger pool of people who can look up at the mountain. You know, there's not clouds covering the mountain.
Yeah, it's a great input. Would you like to offer anything else regarding that question?
I mean, I think it just takes time to find the right person. That's the reality, right? So what I heard is you're looking for somebody with experience, but also flexible in seeing the future and willing to drive to something that's different.
It's either or.
I don't know. So I got really lucky. One of my co-founders has 40 years of experience in the field, has done this a ton of times, but is super agile. And so I think they do exist.
Yeah.
It's very hard to find, but there's people out there that'll do it. You got to find other startup people who have done companies before, have moved on, exited, so they get that experience, right? Have gone through the whole process, but they were founders at one point, right? So they understand that it requires a vision. I definitely think they exist. You just got to find them. It's hard.
I think maybe one other thing I would add is just to follow on what you said is oftentimes you can find mid-career or late career people who have maybe they've had a win right in their past, and they're really just open to doing something totally brand new, and they're not trying to stay on a more kind of linear sequential path. I've seen that work out really, really well.
I would double down on that. In our approach, what we've done, I probably weighed more heavily execution maybe than let's say clout or like kind of pedigree, so to speak. And this comes up a lot with KOLs. There might be like some big name people want you to get, but I feel like as a founder CEO, we are really in the bullseye. The perception from the culture is when are we going to move you on? I mean, if you look at this conference, there's multiple panels about when does the CEO leave. There's one, they even reduced it to math. It was like founder does not equal CEO, which I found less than or equal to, like welcoming. But so my sense was like, okay, I'll probably get scrutiny for not maybe getting the biggest name brand person, but we need to hit the milestones, right? And so I emphasized that, and I've had the same experience. I feel like you can find, if they're too established, they're so successful, they don't necessarily need you. If they're still hungry and they're making a name, and this is like, they're like, what you've got is cool. This could really be one of the landmark FDA clearances that I can point to in my experience. We got an awesome regulatory person from a major place. We like swiped them because they just saw this as something they've never had a chance to do before, hungry, and they made it happen, and we're cleared now. So that's my sense. I may get some scrutiny about not having enough big hitters on my advisory board, but we've also got our milestones. So I don't know, trade-offs.
Yeah. I kind of have a question, which is maybe where you're coming from, is you're getting probably feedback from investors and other people that you need a heavy hitter or somebody big, right? So I always struggle with how have you guys maybe handled getting pushed one way or another from external advisors or investors of you should do this, no, you should do that. And then how do you stay on track of I know what I'm supposed to be doing, this doesn't feel right, or this feels better. And how do you weed through the advice? Because everybody's got advice.
It's all communication. I think there's a key difference between listening to advice and following advice. I listen to most advice. That's information for me. I'll project it onto what I'm doing. Rote following it can be a disaster. And I think it all comes down to how do you communicate with these people. If they feel heard, oh, Gabriel really considered this stuff, but ultimately had the responsibility to chart our own course, I've been able to mostly get that through by being really open and direct with my board. So I think it all really kind of comes down to that communication. And again, another analogy would be there's a big difference between being stubborn and persistent. Stubborn, you're we're going to do this no matter what. You've closed your eyes, your ears, you're not bringing any more information in, you've stopped learning. Persistence is I'm so dedicated to the goal. I'm flexible to find the people and take the approach that we need. So I would just say communicate regularly, often. Your job is to convince them to understand, I think, why this is the right way to go.
I just think I would just maybe one last thing to add is, as a founder, when you're taking advice from various people, no one will understand your company's context better than you. So even though it's famous person X over there said, you should go do that, you should certainly listen. And you should think very, very deeply, sometimes for days and days and weeks about what he or she said to you. But they will never fully understand your context and what you're up against. That's I would say, mostly true.
So on that, and then you mentioned the company is a baby. So if you've had a baby, right, people give you all this advice about your baby from their babies. It doesn't work. Right? There's some general things. You got to feed them. You got to keep them clean and stuff. But the reality is when you're a brand new parent, you know absolutely nothing about it, but you actually know that child better than anyone else on the world. So that's that weird kind of balance you're with. Trust yourself that you know your kid. Take advice, but do what works for your kid. Yeah.
Those are gold nuggets. I'll also add from where I sit, there's an interpretation that an investor or anyone interested in your organization will throw out the word, I need experience. But what they really are saying is, I need confidence. And confidence in what you're looking to get done can come in different forms than exclusively experience. Hence the opportunity for so many first-time insert function here that we place. People move into new roles for the first time because others around the table have confidence in them. And you might want to consider, if the experience is tough to hire, an advisor or perhaps a board member. Or so, and individuals, especially later in career, are very open to conversations in that regard. Hopefully that helps. Oh, we are dead on time.
Or at least it stopped 10 minutes ago. I don't know. Yeah.
Thank you all for your time. Thank you.
Yeah.